The hill that fought back. It was a Sunday morning in February, the kind of crisp, quiet day in upstate New York where the snow seems to hush the world. Behind my house in the small town of Maplewood, there was a hill, our hill. No HOA signs, no fences, just a wide, untouched slope of powdery snow that sparkled under the weak winter sun. My nephew, Tommy, 12 years old and full of fire, called it Frost Peak. He'd spent all week tinkering with a sled he'd built from scrap wood, bolting on steel runners, and painting blue lightning bolts across its sides. A small flag, green and gold, fluttered on the back. His explorer's banner, he said. That hill was his kingdom, a place where he could be a kid without rules or judgment. But some people, like Margaret, couldn't stand to see joy they didn't control. By noon, that hill would be stained with blood, and I'd be dragging 2 people through the snow to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. I stood on the back porch that morning, cradling a steaming mug of coffee, watching Tommy adjust his scarf at the top of the hill. The cold bit my knuckles, but his grin warmed the air. "Ready for takeoff, Captain?" he shouted, giving me a mock salute. I raised my mug. "Cleared for launch, kid." He laughed, the sound sharp and free, and for a moment, the world felt right. But peace is fragile when power-hungry folks are near. Margaret, the self-appointed queen of the Pine Grove HOA, had been eyeing our hill for years. She'd send out snide letters about unsupervised activity or propose bylaws to claim unregulated land. The town always shut her down. The hill was ours, legally and rightfully, but Margaret didn't take kindly to losing. This time, she brought muscle. The roar came first, a low, ugly growl that tore through the silence. I turned just as a black ATV with snow tires crested the hill, carving a gash in the fresh snow. 2 figures rode it. A hulking man in a reflective vest, his jaw set like he was auditioning for a bad action movie, and Margaret, perched behind him like royalty. She wore a garish, winter safety patrol jacket, complete with a homemade badge that screamed petty authority. I set my coffee down and marched toward them. "This is private property," I barked. "Take your circus somewhere else." Margaret didn't flinch. "We've had complaints about unsafe sledding. This hill's a lawsuit waiting to happen." Her enforcer, Vince, revved the engine, smirking. Tommy, halfway down the hill, stopped his sled and looked up, confused. "Uncle Dan, what's going on?" Margaret stood on the ATV, her voice dripping with condescension. "What's going on, young man, is that this slope violates community standards." I stepped closer, my voice low. "You don't scare kids on my land. Get out, or I'll make you." She laughed, but Vince's eyes glinted. He gripped the throttle, and the ATV lurched. Tommy stood, small against the white, and I felt the ground shift. "Tommy, get back!" I shouted, but the engine drowned me out. Vince gunned it, the ATV charging straight for Tommy. The impact was brutal. Wood splintered, the green flag snapped, and Tommy flew, tumbling through the snow like a broken toy. He hit the frozen ground hard, blood blooming from his forehead, staining the snow red. My heart stopped. Margaret cackled. Guessed that sled wasn't up to code. I dropped beside Tommy, my hands shaking as I checked his pulse. He was breathing, barely, his arm twisted at a sickening angle. Blood trickled from his lip. I turned to them, my voice a growl. "You animals." Vince revved the engine again, proud. Margaret smirked, holding up her phone. "For liability purposes," she purred, "in case he tries to sue." Rage exploded in my chest. "You just ran over a child." I spat. "You want to talk liability? I'm about to teach you consequences." Margaret scoffed. "This hill should have been HOA property years ago. He's lucky we didn't fine him for trespassing." "Trespassing? On my land." I stood, fists clenched so tight my nails drew blood. "Say his name," I snarled. "Say Tommy's name, so I know what to carve into the ice when I'm done with you." She clicked her tongue. "You're unhinged, Daniel. Always have been. You and that little delinquent." I took a step forward. "You're not walking away from this." She glanced at Vince, who was wiping snow off his gloves like he'd just finished a chore. "Let's go before this lunatic embarrasses himself." That's when I snapped. Grief, fury, the sound of Tommy's scream, it all fused into something unstoppable. I reached for my hiking pack, the one I kept for winter treks. Rope, carabiners, tools. My hands moved faster than my thoughts. Winter was about to learn my name. I lunged at Vince first, yanking him off the ATV and driving my knee into his stomach. He gasped. eyes wide, but I didn't stop. My fist cracked across his jaw, knocking his smug grin into the snow. "Get off me," he choked, but I had him down, hog-tying his wrists and ankles with rope from my pack. Margaret shrieked, "This is assault. You're insane." I turned, panting. "You hurt a kid. You don't get to talk about sanity." She tried to run, but I tackled her, pinning her face first into the snow. I ripped off her fake badge and bound her legs tight. She thrashed, screaming, but I was past caring. The neighborhood stirred, curtains parted, phones raised. Good. Let them see. I dragged Vince and Margaret to Tommy's shattered sled and an old HOA sled they'd once rented out at absurd prices. I tied Vince face down to Tommy's, Margaret to the other. "You like rules?" I hissed, tightening the straps. "Here's enforcement." I hooked both sleds to my snowmobile and hit the gas. They skidded behind me, scraping over rocks and ice. Margaret's screams turned raw, Vince's groans faded. Snow stung their faces, branches clawed their skin. I didn't look back. Justice doesn't pause. I pulled them through the thickets, where frozen branches tore at Margaret's cheeks. "You want safety patrols?" I shouted. "Here's the tour." Vince's face scraped the ice, blood mixing with the sled's blue paint. I dragged them past the tree where Tommy once hung a birdhouse, past the rock where Margaret tried to plant an HOA sign. At the steepest drop, I stopped. Margaret's face was bruised, her pride shattered. "You done?" I asked. She spat blood. "You'll rot in prison." I crouched beside her. "You already paid. You just don't know it yet." I pulled Tommy's flag from the snow, still clinging to its broken pole. I drove it into the ground near her head. "This hill belongs to him," I growled. "Not you. Never you." She whimpered, and for the first time, she looked small. Vince was silent, broken. The wind howled, carrying Tommy's name across Maplewood. Neighbors gathered, phones out, some in slippers, staring at the red-streaked snow. "Call the cops," one yelled. Another whispered, "Is that Margaret?" I turned to the crowd, pointing at Tommy's sled splintered, bloodied. "She let that man ram my nephew with an ATV?" I roared. She laughed while he bled. Gasps rippled. Margaret tried to speak. "He was sledding in an unapproved." I threw the sled down beside her. "This was his childhood. You stole it." The first cheer came from old Mrs. Carter, then the Wilson kids. Phones stayed up, capturing Margaret's fall. Sirens wailed. Sheriff's deputies climbed the hill, medics rushing to Tommy. The lead sergeant, a grizzled man in a parka, demanded answers. I pointed to the sled, the blood. "That man hit my nephew with an ATV." Margaret filmed it, called it enforcement. The sergeant's eyes narrowed. "You saw it?" I nodded. She was live streaming. I handed over Margaret's phone. The sergeant scrolled, his face hardening as Tommy's scream played. "Well, damn," he muttered. "Cuff them both." Margaret shrieked. "He assaulted us," but the deputies didn't hesitate. Vince limped, Margaret flailed, but they were done. The sergeant looked at me. "You stood your ground. There's a difference." I didn't answer, just watched the medics load Tommy onto a stretcher. His hand twitched. I knelt beside him. "It's over, kid. You're safe." His eyes cracked open. "The flag, is it okay?" I held it up. Still flying. Snow fell as they took Tommy away. Margaret and Vince sat cuffed in cruisers, their empire gone. I walked to the hill's center, where Tommy's sled had broken. I pulled a new pole from my coat, one I'd carved for a fence. I slid Tommy's flag onto it and drove it deep into the frozen ground. It stood tall, green and gold against the white. The sergeant approached. "I've seen a lot, but never a man defend a hill like this." I met his eyes. Was I wrong? He shook his head. "You just beat the law to it." I exhaled. "Tommy, will he make it?" He nodded. "Kid's tough." He walked away, and I stayed, watching snow gather at the flag's base. Neighbors whispered, some calling it madness, others vengeance. But Tommy would know it as the day the hill fought back. By morning, the HOA's website was gone. Margaret's name vanished from every record. Vince faced felony charges for endangering a minor. Margaret got obstruction and misuse of funds. Tommy came home 2 days later, arm in a cast, eyes bright. "Did it snow enough to cover the flag?" he asked. I smiled. "Just enough to make it stand out." That hill was never just snow. It was Tommy's laughter, his freedom. Margaret saw that and tried to crush it, but snow doesn't lie. It remembers. I didn't wait for courts or meetings. I acted. Maybe that's not how everyone would have done it, but it's how I protected what mattered. And I'd do it again. What about you? Have you ever faced someone like Margaret, hiding behind rules to hurt others? Did you stand up, or did someone stand for you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about justice, violence, and where the line is. Was I right to fight back, or did I go too far? Share your story. Like if this hit you hard, and subscribe for more raw truths. Because sometimes, a hill isn't just a hill, it's a legacy worth fighting for.